Good afternoon. So I do believe that we're now live. So firstly, thank you to everyone for joining the discussion today. So my name is Mark Giles, and I'll be the host kicking things off today before I hand over to Ron Lee, who is our moderator and leading today's discussion. So we also have the following panelists. We have Dan Najjar, Associate Partner Implementation for McKinsey & Company, Julie Thine, North America Continuous Improvement Leader, the Dow Chemical Company, Vanindra Bolavaram, Global Operations Excellence Manager for Apache Corporation, and Rebecca Hoffman, Chair for Blockchain for Energy. And finally, to formally introduce your moderator, we have Ronald Lee, VP of Operations for Vuvio. So it goes without saying, we're all very excited to have you here today, and what we hope you find an interesting discussion about OPEX and oil and gas, but more specifically, how organizations can achieve operational excellence in disruptive times. So our panelists will share exactly how they're assessing ongoing change, as well as the practical measures they're implementing to overcome common challenges. So before we start, I'd just like to take a minute to remind attendees that they're in listen-only mode. So that means that you're muted. There is a section for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please do log them in the Q&A section. We can save that for the end of the session, and I will ask the questions to the panelists. You'll also get the opportunity to watch the session post-event as well. So we will send you a link with a recording and various bits and pieces as well. So finally, the feedback is very important to us as well. So I would encourage you to fill out the survey forms and just let us know what your thoughts are. It really will help us shape future events and help deliver value for future events as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to your moderator for the session, which is Ron Lee.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning and good afternoon to all, and we are excited about this morning's session. We have a very diverse group of panelists with different backgrounds, different experiences, and we're excited about sharing and leveraging their knowledge this morning. So, Mark, I would like to have the charts. Okay, so just as a 2-minute introduction into our session, I am VP of Operations for Vuvio, and we are very happy and excited about hosting today's webinar. Our specialty is building the field operator competency. A lot of initiatives have been and transformation type of technologies have been devoted toward the DCS operator. We are focused on the field operator where it all begins. Next chart, Mark. So no surprise to this chart. Anyone that's been in manufacturing know about all of the different initiatives, operational excellence, preparing for the great crew change that's here. And of course, we're involved, trying to capture a lot of the knowledge that will be attriting over the next couple of years. And of course, constant pressures to be more competitive. On top of that, we have the pandemic, and that is really changing the way we work. And so if you take all of those into consideration, we're seeing a lot of companies that are opting to start to look at how we're going to build our competency and maintain the competency of our operations to keep our business competitive. Next chart, Mark. This is a very familiar chart, and I'll only point out the red circled area. Typically, we do spend a lot of assets, capital assets and human assets on robusting equipment, making it last, but most of the problems, according to a study, can be attributed to lack of people, proper interventions about people, how they operate the equipment, the adequacy of their procedures, how well the procedures are being followed. And so we just wanted to make sure people knew that a lot of the problems or a lot of lost capacity and unplanned events could be in that middle circle area. Next chart. And so one of the things that we find very quickly here is that operators are asked to train and qualify on a job with large, cumbersome procedures in the field with inclement weather conditions in most cases, and of course, high noise. When operators are qualified, they only know 30 to 40% of what they really need to know in order to be fully productive. And this is no fault of theirs. They just would not have experienced enough situations to be considered competent in a procedure or in a critical task. And so the only other way for them to gain that experience is to actually be involved in an actual situation. And we all know that's a pretty tough state of being to be in order to learn. So we provide a lot of clarity. We take ambiguity out of procedures. We make sure that everything is sequenced in a step-by-step guidance process that we offer. So there's no excuse for missing a step, for not executing the step properly. And once again, they have those tools. The real winner here is that we train them using their equipment, their actual plant. We call it enhanced reality. So it's not a 3D plot, it's not a 3D drawing, a PNID, it's their actual equipment as it is placed in their field. And so that's what we wanted to explain about our technology. The last chart will just show we have the capability. Next chart. We have the capability to measure their competency. And of course, the green arrow represents Vuvio solution versus traditional methods. And we don't like to say fast in industry, but we are particularly more effective and more efficient. And studies show and data shows that we typically are 50 to 60% more efficient and effective than standard processes. The main thing, everybody learns in a standard way, and your training is standardized, and you can measure the competency. And that's kind of at the bottom rung of your OPEX pyramid. The last chart will show, next chart. This is actually a quick 2 bell curves, and with more data points, obviously the curves will look a lot more sharper. But you can see in the blue line trend reference before Vuvio, traditional. The more orange line is after Vuvio, training in our process. And we actually can show customers, the competency improvement through the use of the bell curves. Real tighter standard deviation and higher means. So that's the last chart that we'll talk about, and we'll now move toward our panel discussion. So first question will go to Rebecca. Having a strong and compelling business case improves and solidifies goals and make the difference in ensuring approval and successful project outcomes. What processes do you use to continuously track, measure, and align project outcomes to new and emerging business needs? Rebecca? We can't hear you.
Got it. It's that
Okay.
mute button. So thank you, Ron, and thank you everybody for asking me to be here today. So you see, I kind of have blockchain in my title, but blockchain is just a tool and an emerging technology like many other technologies, and it takes a combination of them to make things happen. So to kind of answer your question, I'm a believer in collaboration and bringing things together. So bringing together technology, bringing together the right people to create the right standards. And in that, all of that has to be part of your business case. So, and it's extremely hard. It's tough when you're trying to compare innovation type initiatives and emerging technology type initiatives with a, a process improvement one, right? But where we are in today's times, all of our companies are really looking for cost reductions immediately, and we need big reductions. So a common process improvement is not going to get you there anymore. And so to look, you can use the same technical tools of project management, building your business case as you do today. But then to try to take that and bring it to your management and compare it to tools that are off the shelf or things that are already completely ready for implementation is going to be really hard for you to get buy-in from. So what we're finding is they are being more open now because of the pandemic and the need for these cost reductions. But you're going to have to sell it. You're going to have to brand it and show them the bigger vision of what it's going to give management. And a lot of it, you're not going to have the hard facts because it is emerging technology. It may not completely be proven out. You may have to go to other industries, and they may be a little bit more advanced than manufacturing and energy, right? We tend to be the trailing end of things. So I think, to answer your question, it's from a practical, yes, you still do your business case. Yes, you still use your project management, but you have to go in now and get the right people, decision makers. And sometimes that's outside of your current company to get all the right people. That could be government, that could be regulatory agencies, that could be your oil field vendor and supplier, even to say, we've got to get the thought leaders in the same room to get the solution because we need the bigger solution. And the technology we're finding will come along. It will mature with your input because you're specialists.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Julie, comments?
Sure. When I first saw this question, my brain went in a little bit different direction. So I agree with what Rebecca's saying. And to kind of build on that, I think it's so important to agree what our definition of success is. So when we are implementing these projects, understanding, all of us together saying this is what defines success. And one of the tools that I'm a huge advocate of is this idea of using short interval control to really monitor our projects. So instead of setting, one milestone out there at the end that says this is success, which we do need to agree on, we also set a lot of intermediate milestones, and we can use this concept of short interval control to really align our organization and keep our project plan, keep our metrics evergreen as we're going forward and saying, okay, are we meeting the milestone? If we're not meeting the milestone, how do we need to pivot and adjust so that we can really be smart about how we move forward? So that's kind of where I was thinking when I first saw this.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. PB, comments, thoughts?
I agree with what both Rebecca and Julie said. I think one of the key things right now is big cost reductions, as Rebecca was mentioning. I mean, in our industry, in the oil industry, we have gone through negative oil prices in March. That was a shocker. Okay, that's getting like a heart attack to your body. Okay, so we came out of resuscitation, and then we cut off our hands. We did a major open heart surgery. So all those big cost reductions are done. The question now is, how do we sustain the bleeding? Right? We cannot bleed anymore. There is no blood anymore in the body. You can't. You have to sustain the body, keep it reviving, surviving. That's one thing. But then the question is, how do we get on the treadmill?
Yes.
You got to start walking, you have to run, and you have to compete in the market. Okay. So the only way we can do that is, I think what Julie mentioned is clearly be defining what success means. Once we're done with this early part of cutting off the cost reductions, the lagging indicators, okay, we have hit that. Now the question is, we got to focus on the short interval control that you mentioned, Julie. It's around leading indicators. The leading indicators is what we should focus on, and then slowly stitch the story all the way through, and then we will see continuous improvement coming through, and we'll actually sustain for longer term.
Good, great. Thanks for the follow-up. Dan, thoughts, comments?
Yeah. I mean, I love everything that we've heard already. PB, I like the analogy about, like the heart surgery and the bleed out. And what I want to build on with that is, there's a need to get the business case right and keep it up to date to some degree. But what we see in our work is we don't want, you don't want to be in a position where you're spending a lot of energy and resources refreshing business cases because margins have changed significantly. And so usually what we find works best is, obviously you want finance involved and having a hand in vetting these business cases. But if there's a transformation effort that's underway, having alignment on what's the starting point from a margin or cost standpoint, like what is the margin we are going to apply to this operating unit versus that one? And usually, like, as long as everyone's agreed to, if it's the 2020 budget or the 2021 budget, these are the numbers we're using, and then you move forward so that you get away from constantly having to adjust based on, you know, commodity prices moving around. And then the other thing I would add is we sometimes see clients get stuck in this exercise of trying to reconcile the dollars and say, well, you said the business case was going to save us this, and I'm not seeing it hit the bottom line. So where's the disconnect? And usually our guidance on this is like, you're going to be close enough. Like if you have a healthy portfolio of initiatives, some are going to over deliver, some are going to under deliver. So don't spend too much effort trying to make the numbers match perfectly at the initiative level, because you have to just trust that it will be flowing to the bottom line, and it's going to be close enough to what the initial estimates were across the portfolio.
Sure. Great. Oh, great follow. Yes, please. Rebecca?
Ron, I would like to ask Dan. Yes, can you hear me? So Dan, what are you telling? This is great. And absolutely I agree with what you said, but also there's this thing about hard costs, soft costs. A lot of these initiatives are like everybody's like, yes. And they get wrapped up in this hard and soft costs. Well, if it's not a hard cost to the bottom line, well, guess what? If you're inefficient, then you probably indirectly are having some bottom line cost to your. So how is McKinsey kind of advising, if I could ask you, on this hard cost, soft costs, and treating initiatives in that respect?
Yeah, Rebecca, I'm not as familiar, I guess, with the distinction between hard and soft, but let me take a first swing at this, because in what we see, you know, there's a piece around like actual costs, let's call it like contractor costs or headcount costs, and so that's a hard cost. Soft costs, like maybe what we see around like variable costs, those are things where like we don't see as much appetite nor as much bang for the buck if you're trying to, you know, reduce increase fuel efficiency on heaters or stuff like that. One other distinction I'd make within hard and soft costs is recurring versus one time. And we can see some companies who they get excited about one-time cost reductions, and they can put a bit too much energy in those spaces. Whereas usually what transformations that we're assisting with, you know, we're really thinking about it at a recurring level, and the one times are good, but really the focus becomes what's the recurring cost savings that you're going to realize based on, like, those are the initiatives we would prioritize.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just
and part of what I was trying to get to was the process, right? So if you can reduce a process into 4 steps that was 23, that is consistent savings over time, right? So they're more wanting to say, I reduced my fuel costs, and that's a bottom line immediately. So I agree with what you were saying.
Yeah, and so many of the cost roll-ups are aimed at short-term thinking. So they immediately need to see impact on the bottom line, because you're basically quarter to quarter. I mean, in terms of earnings and profitability now, it's not a longer-term look. So that's why the hard costs that you can realize and see on the bottom line are being emphasized so much more in today's climate.
Ron,
yes,
Ron,
please.
if I could just add one thought on that too. So that's, I love that you brought that up, Rebecca, because that's something that we talk about a lot: hard dollars, soft dollars, and that also kind of gets back to this whole idea of we have to agree on what success is. So we have to have a common set of rules or understanding of how we're going to, you know, claim and report out savings, because you can get to this point where everybody's claiming, you know, $1 million in soft dollars here and $1 million here and $1 million here, and somehow, you know, we've saved more than the company makes for the year, and it doesn't make any sense to our C-suite. So we actually have done a pretty aggressive education and marketing type of campaign aimed at really at our like improvement engineers who are doing the projects in the plant, who could very often be doing these soft dollar projects. For those of us that put the material together, we kind of tentatively called it, is it real value? But we shared with them, you know, where are things just moving costs from one place to another, and where is it actually impacting, you know, the hard dollar bottom line costs? And it was pretty eye-opening for some of these people, because they just didn't realize that, you know, at a large integrated site, you know, just I use less steam. Well, that didn't suddenly mean that the site has less steam. So there was a lot of just good learnings with that. And I think we have a little bit more common set of words to use and ways to evaluate our projects. So that's been big for us too. So I really like your thoughts there.
Yeah, great, great. Well, thanks for all of the additions and the thoughts. And we can continue to build upon this. The second, the third question is more transformational, has to do, I think, with change management. And it sort of goes as most transformation efforts do not really reach their full potential. And in a lot of cases aren't sustainable. Some of the reasons are employee resistance, okay? Management behaviors does not support the change is another reason. And of course, just inadequate resources, both from a human and a financial budget standpoint, is not available in order to really drive and see the transformation through. So from your, and there are other obstacles obviously, but from your position, your culture, or the area that you work in, which of those would be the major concern for you, or maybe even another obstacle that I have not mentioned? So Julie, we'll start with you this time.
So Ron, I would like to firmly say all of the above, but
Okay.
that's maybe not the right answer. Yeah, those are all absolutely challenges. And change management is something that we've also been thinking about within our organization and doing a lot more educating of people. We have had a very robust management of change culture, which is really the mechanics of documenting a change, but where we often fell, you know, not as well was with this idea of change management, the human side of change and how people react to change. And so that's something that we've been much more focused on. We've actually trained people as change managers within our organization. And probably the two key things that we really focus on are, you know, one, helping people understand that there are different reactions to change, and that's normal. There are people that are going to react positively to change and people that are going to react negatively to change. And just explaining how that whole process works, and that it can happen literally in the, you know, the 2 minutes that you were listening to somebody tell you what the change is. You could go through the entire change curve in your head and already be at acceptance, or this could be weeks or months long. And so that's something we've really you know, shared with people and tried to get that out there to help them understand, you know, why we react the way we do to change. The other thing around change management that has been a big emphasis for us is sponsorship of change. You know, we can't just change because we feel like it. We have to have a reason for this. We need to have sponsorship of this change, and we need to engage our sponsors. If you're a sponsor for change, it's not like, oh, here's the project, go do it and let me know how it goes. We need you as a sponsor to be visible and engaged. We need you to be an advocate for this change, and we need you to be a communicator. And so those are kind of the two areas, almost like both sides of the spectrum, at the top end about the sponsorship, and at the shop floor level of how people are physically going to react to change.
Yes, great, great. Thank you. PB, you're next up on this question.
That is great. Great point, Julie. So I'll mention. I'll talk about 2 points. Okay. One is I'll add to what change management piece is. Over my career, I've gone through major changes in my own career, first and foremost thing, and also leading teams from diverse portfolio from, you know, different countries to even in the U.S. Even in the U.S., you know, Wyoming compared to Texas is completely different. So one of the key things that I've used, I'll give another analogy, just like the heart thing. This is another one. I learned about change management very early on by reading a book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath.
Yes.
And it talks about 3 things for change. As leaders, we have to first define the path. I think we talked about context, being very clear about what we are getting to. We need to be clear about setting the path up. It can be curvaceous. It's never going to be straightforward. Okay. Second, the book talks about the elephant. That's what we are trying to move, the elephant. Okay. And I am the rider. Okay. First thing, the elephant is not going to move in the direction that we want. It will even resist it. Okay. We want to move in this direction, it will go in the other direction. Okay. The rider is responsible for moving it. Now he has to move the elephant to the path, the end path. The way to do that is by building trust with the elephant, right? The way you build a trust with the elephant is give a banana, which is basically saying feed the elephant first with what their priorities are. The customer is the most important part. They will say, I don't, it could be a simple quick win. Just give that quick win and get to build the trust. Then the elephant will start moving in the direction that you want, because they will build and they will realize that, yep, I'm okay with that. If we go with a sledgehammer and try it, it is not going to work. The elephant will not even move. Okay, forget. It may actually topple the rider. So these are the things that we got to remember, right? So on change management side. So I just going to give that analogy, right? Then the second thing for me in oil and gas, when we talk about technology, we have a very different perceptions. I'll put this perception out first and clear the perception. We are an industry actually that is remarkable in technology. I mean, we have hydraulic fracturing. Take that. We have changed the entire spectrum. We drill in deep water in miles and miles that we can't even see. It's like no different than being up in the space. Okay. Subsea interventions. We are using ROVs. We are using drones. I mean, it's not like we are back in some old age, right? You know, it's not. But that's a perception from the Silicon Valley. Just because we don't use mobile technologies, mobile platforms, cool stuff, Slack, this, that. I'm like, yeah, we can use all those things. But the unfortunate thing is lack of infrastructure. Whether you go to offshore platforms, okay, which is nowhere in the places. We operate in deserts. We operate in Midland, Texas, which is like 20,000 square miles where there is no connectivity. Okay, there's no cell phone connectivity. So how will a platform like that work? First and foremost thing we have to do is build an infrastructure. We have to have that infrastructure in the US, in onshore. Yeah, build some more towers, you'll be okay. Offshore, it is metal structures. That is the technology that they have to figure out, is how does cell phone coverage, LTE, and all these coverages actually can penetrate to the steel structures. At home, we are built with wood. Even there, I go up to second floor, up to my game room, I don't have coverage. So that's the kind of a thing that we should be focusing on, is what problem are we solving? It's not just giving a fancy platform to somebody and saying use it. They're going like, what am I going to use it for? Okay. So
yes. Thank you, sir. Very additive. Dan, you're next up on this one, and I know this is one that McKinsey works on a great deal.
Yeah, and would be happy to share some thoughts. I mean, I agree with what Julie said around, you know, all these potential failure modes around employee resistance, management behavior, not supporting the change, or inadequate resourcing. I mean, these all, like, yes, I select all of the above. One thing I'd say about resourcing, though, from a budgeting standpoint, you know, like we challenge companies to think beyond just, you know, people want to just think if you throw capital money at something, then that's how we're gonna, you know, improve the efficiency or throughput or reduce the cost of this facility. And we like to challenge folks on that and say, like, how much can really be done with small or no capital? And that's the main driving force of the recurring cost savings or revenue improvements that we like to see in transformations. And so, you know, I would challenge folks who think, you know, well, the only thing holding me back is we don't have enough money to spend on all the improvements. Like, there is enough knowledge and expertise within your workforce that you can unlock a ton of potential when managed properly, when the transformation is managed properly. To manage it properly, a couple other things come to mind. On employee resistance, you know, what that translates to in my mind is, you know, some employees at the front line and middle management levels, they may think this is just another flash in the pan kind of effort. I've seen these come and go before. Why is this one any different?
Yeah.
And so you need to signal why that, how this one's different and why it's different. And so a few things come to mind. One is, from the leadership team, telling the story of why we are embarking on this journey right now and what we are setting to achieve. And they have to keep hammering that message, and that message needs to cascade through the organization. It's not just the CEO saying it, it's all the VPs and then all the plant managers and even all like the area supervisors, having a consistent but also personal message as why we're doing this right now. That's one signal. Another signal is kind of HR related ones. And this is where I would put the plug in that if you're going to do a big transformation, HR should be involved early on, because this is where they can help think through what additional training is needed where in the organization for this, for us to reach our full aspiration. What potential reorganizations need to take place? Do we need to deploy some of our resources and personnel in other areas than we have? Like digital transformations would be one example, right? Like PB, you talked about infrastructure, and it's not just the infrastructure, but also how does this organization support a more tech-enabled kind of setup? And then there's also with HR, there's the potential for how do we reward folks for success and for their contributions to a program like this. So these are all things just as signals to the workforce to say this time's different and this thing isn't just going away. We have made structural changes in how we're doing our work and organizing our company to support this thing, going forward. And then let's see, one last thing I want to say is the importance of leadership behavior, and that leadership is consistent in what they are doing relative to what they're saying. So like if they're asking their organization to change how they are working, then leadership should also be role modeling that in a visible way, so that people don't misinterpret and think, well, they say leadership tells me one thing, but then they're still doing things the way they've always done it, and so why should I feel like it should be different for me?
Good. Well, thank you, Dan, for that perspective. And Rebecca, we would like for you to have an opportunity to comment and add value to this question.
Yeah, I agree. That I think we've covered everything. So, Dan, that was great, and I agree with you. You have to have the vision, and it has to be pounded in, just like we've done safety, right? I mean, in the energy industry, safety. I'm safe at my house because it's so pounded into me over the years. We need to do the same thing with this type of mindset change that we need to have occur. And then I agree with you so much about the HR side. That's part of what I was going to say, is that until we change our KPIs, until we change a bonus structure, then that change won't happen throughout the companies, because we're seeing it over and over again. They'll do just the minimum they need to do because they need to save some for next year's bonus. And so you're not getting that big bang effect that the companies need immediately. Or, hey, this is just my silo and I'm going to get my bonus on my silo. So I'm not going to worry too much about, and that's what kind of Julie said, you're just transferring the problem to somebody else and the inefficiencies and the cost. And so until we take a holistic HR perspective where it affects the pocket, I think then change won't really occur in a big way. So great comments, Dan, Julie, and PV.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we'll move on. PB, you will be the lead off on this one, and it has to do with the current situation we have. The coronavirus outbreak is basically posing profound challenges on us in our personal lives and our corporate lives. And people are beginning to adjust their mindsets that this could be the way of life. This might be the way we live. I mean, We just went through a holiday period where, you know, probably the emphasis on getting together as a family, the traditional way, may not have been highly advised from a celebration standpoint. So people, the reality of how the new life or the new norm might look like is beginning to introduce itself. As a leader, you mentioned that you travel from site to site or location to location, PB. How do you leave behind optimism with your workforce? What do you say? What are the words that help fill their gaps or meet their needs as a leader? How do you intervene and help them get through this situation?
Yeah. So first and foremost thing is setting the context. I mean, I think it's very important to talk about where we are. Um, you know, if you think back 12 years ago, we went through global financial crisis.
Mhm.
It was called global, but actually it was only 12 economic nations that actually went through the biggest changes. This is different. This is a pandemic, as you said, has changed completely the way we work.
Mhm.
And we are in the field. We are essential employees, but it doesn't mean that we don't get in contact with the virus. We can easily get in contact with the virus. So it's very different in terms of how we actually, uh, you know, the expectations that we have to set, right? We have to be very transparent around it. Now, once the pandemic came in, we saw what the economic impact is. As a leader, we have to be transparent. Most important thing, we just have to answer the questions with facts and be open and transparent. I mean, we went through major layoffs in the company, and we did those. We came out. We talked about it that we will have layoffs. We're coming, and understand emotionally and be personal with them, right? Um, and then talk about, like, you know, what does it mean once you go through that, you know, reductions. Then actually it comes to building the trust. Some of our very good friends, they're, you know, who's work together are no longer there. So how do we build the trust with the rest of the folks? How do we energize them? And then bring, and then actually talk about sense of urgency. Because as I said, the open heart surgery, when I said before, right? Yeah, the open heart surgery was done when I was running in the treadmill. It is not laying on a bed. So people are extremely stressed. So being very clear about priorities, making sure we don't have too many of those. They're focused on what is the most important thing. Tell them why is it important and how it is actually going to help in terms of the bottom line financials for the company's outcome. Okay, then actually give them recognition. Just, you know, the stress that people go through in the field, their families are at home, their kids are being taken care of, and give them the space. Okay, whether it is, you know, in my team is both people who work in the field, people who work in rotational jobs, people who work in uh, at home. I've told them, be flexible. I think that's the new ways of working. I cannot be saying you're going to only work 10 hours a day. I mean, guys are putting in a lot more work. I recognize them when they do fantastic job. I know where they're overworked and everything. I tell them, hey, you know, my company can't pay for it, but I know I can. I can afford a meal. I tell them, order it from Uber Eats. Sit down with the family, have a nice meal. That is the personal touch that you can bring as a leader, and that brings an amazing difference. Uh, Other thing, working as one team, right? We are all spread out now. It's not like walking around and I can have a lunch with 3 other people and, like, yeah, we can talk about it. It's not the same thing. So you use technology. I mean, we all are using WhatsApp or whatnot, right? I mean, so why don't we use text message? I created a text message for my team. I told my admin, I said, hey, create a text message, and after hours, weekends, we share dishes that we are cooking, what we're doing with our friends, what we're doing with our family. I mean, crazy GIF images. I mean, that's how we bring trust and one team approach. You know, in this time of pandemic and where we are working differently, team doesn't mean we have to be together in one space. It's basically wherever we are, we have the common set of goals, and together everyone achieves more. That's how it's going to be done.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So insightful. Dan, please, you're next.
PB, that was so well put. And I like to consider like a team text chain or if I have a text chain with clients, once there's a crazy GIF image that's been shared, then I know we've arrived. Like this team is gelling now. So I love that piece. And I want to build on what PB said about like the personal relationships and the importance of that now more than ever. And just creating the space to have those conversations of how are you doing? Like really, how are you doing? And let's not just like the cheap conversation of like, oh, I'm good, you know, how are you? Like let's really dig in and let's reciprocate too, right? As a leader, it can't just be, hey, I'm just probing for information. It's I genuinely care and I'm going to reciprocate and tell you how the hell I'm doing and like what's working for me and the challenges I'm up against as well. So the personal piece of it is so important. And you know, Ron, this is a tough question. Like this is a very difficult thing to try to be managing right now, in light of all the personal challenges and professional challenges we're all seeing. Just a couple of things I would add to what PB already shared is we have to focus on what's within our own control. You know, especially in these commodity-based industries, like we can't say anything about margins or what the price in or the price out is going to be. What we do control is how we're operating, and so let's focus on that. And then to pull from what Julie said earlier, it's the short interval control around like, are we seeing the progress, you know? And like maybe you have to get a little bit creative here, but just finding ways to show that progress is happening, just to give people some wind in their sails, because we all need more of that over the last 8 or 9 months.
Yes. Thank you, Dan. Great add-on. Rebecca, comments and thoughts, please.
Oh, I love what everybody's saying. It comes back to hope, right? People need hope in a time of crisis, and that they need to know there's even opportunity in a time of crisis. And it is pushing people out of their comfort zones. And if we try to speak with them, making sure they have the tools they need to operate and do their job well. I personally love Microsoft Teams. I've gotten into that, and that has been an enormous enabler for our team globally. And I don't mean to promote one product, but if you haven't seen it, there's probably others like it. It's awesome. But giving them the tools, understanding where their gaps are or what their struggles are, so that you can come alongside of them as a leader and help them determine how to make their lives a little easier. Because you're right, PV, they've got young kids. I don't have young kids at home anymore, but I can't even imagine having to homeschool young kids and do your full-time job. And so my heart as a mother goes out to those people. It is a whole new way of working. I mean, I'm in our cabin, and so, you know, you're taking calls from wherever you can. But yes, I think the people side's so important. And even the people that have been let go, this is a small industry for us. And everything comes around, and everybody we know comes back around. And so even, you know, breathing out, there's opportunity if you really look. And coming through the crisis, you know, as a leader, mentoring people to say, what can you do in the crisis, and what can you do on the other side of the crisis, and how can you fit in, and kind of redefining yourself, because now we are all being pushed, and to kind of reevaluate, right? Where can we add value in this time? So I think that's a really what I try to do with a lot of people that you know, interact with today.
Yes. Good, great. Thank you. Very additive comments. So Julie, you'll get a chance to kind of close out and bring you know, a summary to the question. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it comes back to where PB started with open and honest communication. Our C-suite took that to heart very early on, and beginning in April, we started having weekly web calls with the C-suite. The top 3,500 leaders in the company were invited to these calls. The first one was voice only, but I can't say enough nice things about our IT department through all this. By the second one, they had webcams set up for all these guys, and we're a global organization, right? So I actually sat in on one of these calls this morning. It was the 16th one that they held, and each one was just this great opportunity for this open communication. They wanted to make sure that we as leaders knew what we needed to know to be able to talk to our employees. And that was really important. The other kind of side effect of all this was it humanized all of us, and it humanized our C-suite, because, you know, we could see their home office in the background. We saw a couple of dogs even. I mean, it was just a great way to bring us together. And our CEO actually said something about that this morning on the call, was that if there's ever a silver lining that we have from this whole experience, is that we have come together closer as people and as a family within the company. And because we were a global company, every one of our sites and our people were experiencing different parts of the pandemic. So, I mean, we had the operations in the US that were going through shutdowns, but meanwhile, in our operations that are in China, they were starting to see a recovery. And so we were able to see stories of success from them. And our partners down in Latin America were able to get a preview of what might be coming, so they could, you know, mentally and emotionally prepare themselves. And so to me, I think communication has just been huge. And in any sort of a situation like this, where you have, you know, uncertainty and you need to build resiliency in your employees, the more you can be open and honest and just be human with them, I think it goes a long way.
Sure. Good. Great. All well-rounded, and I think touches the subject from a couple of different perspectives. There was a technical piece where it's a gap closer during these times. And of course, then there was the soft stuff that PB and Dan hit on. And the soft stuff is really the hard stuff. And we learn that's seemingly over and over again. The last questions, and then we'll start with you. What managing processes do you employ to make sure your improvement initiatives are on track and are fully scalable, standardized, and institutionalized in the day-to-day, operations, or let me just say, day-to-day operations of your team? What processes do you typically use and employ?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. What I would say here is, first, what's the point of having these managing processes in place? And the purpose, in my mind, is around being able to reprioritize, to allocate resources, and to remove barriers, and for leadership to have that visibility, so that then leadership at a middle management level, at an executive level, can actually help manage this transformation process that's underway. So that's the purpose of it. So then the question is, well, how do you do that? Typically what we like to employ, you need some sort of centralized tool that is able to give the visibility on all the entire portfolio of initiatives that are taking place. Now, in some cases, you could do this in Excel if you're, if that's the best tool that you have available to do it. Now, that's hard, because then it's not as collaborative and hard to keep up to date. What we see work really well are web-based tools that allow for the entire organization to be collaborating in real time, so that then you can use all this different information around, when is the scheduled date for this thing to be completed? What's the actual savings? What was the planned savings? Have all that information at your fingertips, and then you could cut that into so many different reports, which then leads me to the last piece, which is, you have the tool. Now, how are you sharing that information and using it? And so that revolves around like having weekly meetings at various levels of the organization. So, someone who's managing a set of crude units in a refinery, like that area superintendent should then be having a weekly meeting with his team around, how are our initiatives progressing? Are we on track or not? Where can I help? And then that cascades upward, though, to all the way up to the chief transformation officer, who's going to also be having weekly meetings about, at an organizational level, Are we tracking or not? And where are the issues? Where can we help? And then, from there it goes one more step up at like a quarterly level to the EVPs or to the board, to say like this transformation, like we have reconciled however many millions of dollars to the bottom line, et cetera. So I'll hand it over though. Rebecca would love to hear what you got too.
Okay, Rebecca, yes, you're on call.
Okay, thanks, Dan and Ron. Yeah, I took this question from kind of a lot bigger perspective, I guess, because I'm part of a collaborative effort with 10 major operators in the energy industry, right? So we looked at things saying to make true transformational change and get through this transition and this crisis even, we have accelerated projects, right? How to accelerate projects, how to get adoption and scaling. These are all the things that thought leaders are coming together from these companies and saying, okay, it can't just be us, we're operators. We have to now bring in regulatory and government. We need to bring in oil field vendors and suppliers. We need to bring in all the different parties and get a consensus and agreement on what is this new way of working when we come out of this. Because it actually started way before the pandemic, right? That we needed these cost savings. And so we were on that trajectory, thank goodness, and have formulated ourselves. But we were thinking from even a bigger standpoint of, yes, you can change in your own four walls, but you need the whole gamut of players to really transformationally change the industry of where we need to go. I mean, let's face it, we've been doing some of the same processes for 60 years. We are amazing innovators when it comes to specific engineers coming together and developing something for a well. But just our processes and how we kind of run the visibility, real-time information, like Dan was saying, to be able to make those decisions and have it at your fingertips and then deploy it to the places it needs to go. That's not where we're embarking on that with digital twin and with some other mechanisms, but bringing all this kind of technology is a tool. So it's about collaborating to get agreement and to put in standards that people and organizations will use and that everybody has kind of bought into so that it happens. I mean, we've got amazing standard boards that have put together these great things, and then some use them, some don't. So we can't continue to go in that route. And so I was thinking more about this to get adoption and scaling. You got to have the right parties in the right room with the right thought leaders agreeing we will use these standards as we make them because we're making them together.
Okay, great, thank you. Julie, please, your comments and thoughts?
Yeah, I love that thought from Rebecca about we have standards, but we have to get everybody bought into them. We want a set of standards that everyone can use. And so, Dow is an incredibly work process driven company. We've never met something we can't put a work process on. And it actually leads to a company culture and a set of standards that we can get behind. What we found, though, is as we've had some of these work processes for, decades and decades, and we're starting to really take a look at them and see that we still have silos, we still have opportunities where we can streamline and improve. And so we actually have a whole effort launched that we're calling the end-to-end project that's looking at all these work processes that we have and really focusing in on those handoffs and those places where we're talking to each other. So do we have a different work process for supply chain than we do for operations? Do we have a different work process for payroll than we do for IT? And does that make sense? Or can we harmonize some more of these things and push them across the enterprise so that we do have that common set of standards and metrics and just ways of doing work? So that was kind of what I thought about when I heard this question.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that perspective. PB, your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I agree with what Dan mentioned. We start with why. Why do we have a management process? And because people are not really interested in having another process being shoved under their throat. So we got to be very careful and think about where it applies and how it applies. Um, Centralized tools, I like that idea. I think that's very important because that's the only way we can share knowledge. Um, uh, so I'll go back to the management processes, right? And going back to what we said before on the strategy piece, right? We said, how do we react to this uncertain environment? Um, so we have rocks, we have handled the rocks, we have pebbles, and we have sand. And I see when it comes to frontline kind of ideas, I think Dow does really well in terms of continuous improvement. We know that, and that is the sand piece. Really, it is around how do we energize the workforce in the front line and not cumbersomely put them into, hey, every idea is a good idea. We just tell them that small ideas make a big difference. Okay, the sand is so important. Yeah, you know, and if I put any metrics on ROIs, as for payouts, it's going to be a failure. I have to treat that differently. The rocks will have a separate uh, hurdles and metrics. The pebbles will have different, and sand has to be different. That's the most important thing that I've realized, that we have to think about those pieces, especially the frontline staff. We don't. If there are 1,000 ideas, there is not enough engineers to be able to go through every single one. Yeah. So we have to give them the freedom to go execute it, and they are passionate. They know exactly what the problems they have, and they can solve it. We just have to be watch team backup, be there for them and support them.
Good, good. Well, great. And that sort of concludes our questions. I would like to say it's been a privilege to have you all as panelists and leverage a lot of the great knowledge, experience, and the guidance that you've provided here. So this has been well worthwhile. And I hope the audience will receive a lot of value because you bring a lot of experience and know-how, and it was all brought together and collaborated. So unless one of you all have a parting question or comment you would like to make, I'll pass it back over to Mark.
Perfect. Well, I guess that brings the session to a close. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Julie, PB, Rebecca, and Dan.
Yes.
Special thanks to Ron as well for moderating the session. I hope everybody's found the session useful. I certainly have. Just a reminder, we do have a survey form after the session as well. So please do take your time out to fill that out. It is useful for us to know what your thoughts are. That way we can improve future sessions. We will send you a follow-up email. I'll have a link on there as well for the recording of the session, so you will get to watch this back again. Other than that, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'd like to thank everyone again and bid everyone a good day.
Happy holidays, be safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Take care.
Mm-hmm.